And what are you telling me? Now you're questioning the Masorah? I'm smelling heresy like I feel like I'm at a shish kebab of heresy, and it's like stinking up the room, right? It's like I don't really care at that point. I just want to get away. Stop. Right? So when I hear somebody called Rabbi Mark is questioning the Masorah, I'm just like, whatever. Right? Like next is Rabbi Barbara, or the worst would be like a woman who takes like a Christian name, like Rabbi Mary, right? Mother Mary, Rabbi Catherine, right? It's like, stop. Okay, so what were you saying?
What about when the commentators disagree with each other?
Well, they can do that. We say Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chaim. Very simple, right? We say that every single thing that the commentators say has Ruach Kodesh behind it. It's all holy. It doesn't always agree, but that was the way that God intended it. He smashed the Ten Commandments. The Luchos of Bris were smashed. The Ten Commandments were smashed. The tablets were smashed. We didn't come down here and have just one Torah and everybody follows. We went off into different directions, and the Torah that we took with us changed slightly over time. I'm going to say like 98-point-something% of what's in the vast amount of oral Torah, everybody's on the same page on. All the arguments that you see in Shas is on a very minute amount. It's a very minute amount. It's like Hillel and Shammai, I think, only had 6 arguments in all of Shas, but their students had thousands, right?
Right.
Because from generation to generation, it just expands. You separate from other people, and you start to come up with different streams. Mm-hmm. It's not exactly the same. So, like, Rambam is over here in wherever the hell he was, with Tunisia or something, Egypt or something, and Rashi's over in France. They could be living like at the same time, but they're going to start going different directions, and that's fine. God is fine with that. And we say, Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chaim, that both streams are 100% from Moses, right? It's just that we're not going to necessarily hold by one of them, and that's fine. So you can ask the question, well, which one did he tell Moses? And you know what the answer is going to be? The truth is, God told him, in the end of days, you're going to have 6 different Sfaras. You're going to have 10 people arguing different ways on this, Moses. This is the way I'm telling you now. But I'm also going to tell you that the other 9 I consider holy. Because they were done L'Shem Shemayim, they were done with Ruach HaKodesh, and they were done Kedin. They were done the way I tell you to do it. They just ended up with a different result. So on Mount Sinai, yes, Moses was shown all the different Sfaras that could possibly come. He was shown, what Rabbi Akiva might say, and Rabbi Yishmael might say. He got all of that. Yeah, the arguments were brought down later. Moses already saw all that. Problem solved. We don't need, some Rabbi Mark come and tell us, oh, the Masorah, that's only talking about those written words down the middle. But anything on the side, it was written by rabbis, and we can dismiss it, and now we can all run around with Christian names. No. Anything more? Okay. I just want to make this final point. Not believing that our Masorah is authoritative, but it's rather just an amalgamation of opinions and commentaries on the truth that are on equal plane to our own interpretations of Torah teachings, and not truth in and of itself, that is heresy, and it can cost a person his share in the world to come. And that's unacceptable. Right? So when Dennis Prager gets up on the radio and he goes, okay, we got a Rashi, we got a Tosfos, and we got a Prager here, and I can argue against these people, that's unacceptable. And when he does that, and he pulls these things out of his butt, and he's going to interpret for us what the Torah says, he's committing heresy. And when you quote that, and you follow that, you're following heresy, you're not following Torah. Okay? So that's my point on that. Can I keep going on this?
Yes, please.
Okay. Chazal, you know who Chazal is, right?
The rabbis of the Talmud.
The rabbis of the Talmud had a Masorah, a Torah tradition, a teaching, a tradition for each and every one of their Pesakim. Everything that they poskin because that's how they learned it from somebody else. They didn't make it up themselves. And today's true leaders of the Torah world likewise have Masoras for their Pesakim. They're telling us exactly how they learn it from the prior generation. And we cannot argue with generations that have already passed. Okay, we can't argue against Rabbanim who were here 200 years ago, and they couldn't argue against the Rishonim. And people like Rashi and Rambam cannot argue against the Gemara, and the Amoraim of the Gemara couldn't argue against the Tanaim. And that's how it goes. You cannot argue against the previous generation, because it's assumed that they knew more than you, because they were closer to the fire. Mount Sinai is a fire. Moses was in the fire. He came out like a hot cauldron, poured it out to the people in the desert. They received it, and they're like burning hot with it, and everybody gets it like all the way down. You can't say, oh, I know it better than you. They were smoking piping hot up there. You can't argue they knew more than you. They knew more than you. Can you say that? Can you say that Rashi and Rambam knew more than you?
Yeah, because I can barely read Hebrew.
So will you take their opinion over Dennis Prager, who lived 1,000 years later?
No, Dennis Prager can read Hebrew.
And do you think that Rashi and Rambam know more than Dennis Prager?
Generally speaking, yes.
Generally speaking,
Yeah.
So if there's an argument between Rashi and Dennis Prager, who do you go like?
I'm probably going to side with Dennis Prager, but it's not because I think he knows more necessarily.
Unbelievable. Okay. That's all you have to know. So if there's a rule, and it says we cannot argue against the previous generations. And that you can find out, you look it up yourself, it's in the Ramban on Baba Basra 12a. And we're also not allowed to hold by opinions that we do not have a Masorah to hold by. You can't just come around today and say, oh, science, they believe in evolution, so we're allowed to believe in it. No, there's no Masorah of evolution. Therefore, that would be kafira. That would be heresy to believe that that's acceptable, because the Torah has no room for it, as we've never had a tradition for that. The end of Tractate Brachos gives instructions as to how each generation determines which opinions we hold by and which ones we can't. That's what I want to say on that.
Great. So this week's Torah portion is Mishpatim. It's the Torah portion after the giving of the Aseret HaDibrot, the Ten Commandments. So that came in Parshas Yitro. So this is Parshas Mishpatim. It runs from Exodus chapter 21, verse 1, to Exodus chapter 24, verse 18. So these are instructions on how to lead a life. This parsha deals with tough stuff like slavery. Now, the Torah isn't about feel good as much as it's about doing good, and often doing good does not in the moment feel good. So there's no realm of religion in Torah. Torah covers everything. Jewish religion is not just confined to ritual and to temple. Central experience of Jewish history is Egypt, the exodus from Egypt, and the getting of God's law at Mount Sinai. So slavery is an essential part of the Jewish experience. So knowing how bad it is to be a slave, so this Torah portion says how you treat a slave. Now, I don't like the word slave.
That's a terrible translation.
It's a terrible translation, but the Hebrew word is eved. And eved can mean slave, but most of the times in the Torah, when it's giving instructions on how Hebrews are to treat their evedim, it's more bondservant, indentured servant. So it's the same word for servant and for slave, but it says that the Jews are to be God's eved, to be God's servant. So we're not slaves to God, we're servants of God.
Ivdu es Hashem b'simcha.
We are to serve God with joy.
It doesn't say you should slave to God with joy. That doesn't make any sense. It's you serve God with joy.
So there are three classes of Jews who can become slaves. There are thieves, debtors, and paupers. So let's say you're a pauper, you have nothing to eat, and no place to live. You can sell your services in return for room and board. What about thieves? Let's say I steal from you and I can't pay you back. Well, the only way I can pay you back is with my labor. So I become an indentured servant to you. Then also debtors. Let's say I borrow money from you and I'm unable to pay it back. So the way I repay my debt is by indentured servitude. So I think in some ways this is a better system than ours, because why is it more dignified to say take charity and to take loans and not pay them back, or to steal and not pay it back, than to work for somebody who you owe and pay off your debt honorably